I'm Ahmad Ali Ahmadi from Educare Institute, and we are continuing with our subject Literature in English, solving Necta Form 4 2021. And our today's question is question number 8, which reads, it is urged that poems are rich in the use of figures of speech. Support this argument with reference to 2 poems. Give 3 points for each poem. Na hili ndo swali letu la leo, swali la 8 Necta ya 2021. Na swali letu kama linavyoonekana hapo linasema kwamba inakubalika kwamba mashairi ni tajiri sana katika kutumia figures of speech, and we are going to see the meaning of figures of speech, and we are required to support this statement. Tunatakiwa tuungane na hii statement au tukubaliane nayo kwa kurejelea mashairi mawili, na tunatakiwa tutoe hoja 3 kutoka katika kila shairi. So as long as our question is an essay question type, we are going to answer it by dividing it in 3 parts, which is introduction, main body, and we will finalize by seeing a conclusion. Starting with the first part, which is introduction. In introduction, we are required to provide a meaning of a key term, which is a poem. In our question, the key term is a poem. Therefore, by definition, poem simply means or refers to literary composition in the form of verses and stanzas using language creatively to reflect social realities. Poem, what is poem? Poem tunasema ushairi kwamba ni piece of writing or literary composition ambayo inakuwa katika mistari na na stanzas, katika beti, na pia inatumia lugha kwa ubunifu ili kuakisi what is taking place in the societies. Also, another key term in our question is figures of speech. By definition, figures of speech means or are literary devices that are the result of creative use of language in literary works. Kwamba hizi figures of speech tunasema ni literary devices ambazo zinatokana na matumizi ya lugha creative use of language. Yeah. For example, tumesema hapa poems ni composition, literary composition ambazo zinakuwa katika in form of verses and stanzas and uses language creatively. So here is where we get these figures of speech. Figures of speech are the result of creative use of language in literary works. So example of figures of speech are like hyperbole, metaphor, paradox, and etc., and other figures of speech. So this is our introduction, and by referring to 2 poems, which is Freedom Song by Majolie Oluz Masgoy and The Building the Nation by Christopher H.M. Barrow, the following arguments support an argument that poems are rich in the use of figures of speech. And we are going to start with a poem, Freedom Song by Majolie Oluz Masgoy. Ni kwamba katika hili shairi letu, katika swali letu ambalo linasema mashairi ni tajiri sana katika kutumia figures of speech. Kwa hiyo tukubaliane nayo na hiyo contention kwa kulifaa au kwa kurejelea mashairi mawili. Kwa hiyo tunachokifanya tunaenda kuangalia, je, ni kweli mashairi they are rich in using figures of speech? So what we are going to do here is that we are going to see those figures of speech which are found in these 2 plays, which are like our references here, and we are going to start with Freedom Song, which is written with Majolie Oluz Masgoy. So, and the first point is iron. Iron is a statement whose meaning is different from what is being said. Kwamba ni iron ni statement au sentence ambayo maana ya hiyo sentence ni tofauti na kitu ambacho kimesemwa au kinamaanishwa. So that is what the so called iron. For example, a title of the poem is Freedom Song, but in the poem a main character who is Atieno seems to have no freedom. This is portrayed by the following verses. Kwamba tunasema hivi, shairi title au kichwa cha shairi letu ni nini? Freedom Song. But in reality, what we are going to find within our poem that the main character, who is Atieno, does not have freedom at all. So it is, I mean, the title Freedom Song is differently, or it is meaning is differently from what is being said or from what it meant. So that is iron. For example, this is proven by the following verses. Atieno washes dishes, Atieno packs chicken, Atieno gets up early, beds her sacks down in the kitchen, Atieno yo. Kwamba tunamwona hapa Atieno hana uhuru, kwamba yeye ndo anafanya zile shughuli zote pale nyumbani kama vile kuosha vyombo, sijui ku pack chicken, lakini pia anaamka asubuhi sana, naona. So tunaona all in all Atieno katika shairi letu hana uhuru ambao ule umesema katika nini title ya shairi letu. So this is iron, because what is being said by our title is quite different to what we are going to find within our poem. So that is the first figure of speech which has been used in this poem. And the second is euphemism. And by meaning, euphemism is the statement that is substituted from a one which is considered to be too harsh. Euphemism, kwamba hii ni statement ambayo ilitolewa statement ambayo inaonekana iko harsh sana, ikawekwa statement ambayo inakuja kudilute the harshness of the first statement. So that is so called euphemism. For example, this is shown in a poem when a persona says, where lavished in her funeral, Atieno's gone to glory, Atieno yo. Here we see that Atieno gone to glory. This is a euphemism. A statement here has been there is a statement which has been substituted by this statement. Kwamba tunaona hapa hii statement yetu hapa hii Atieno's gone to glory, kwamba hapa Atieno anazungumzwa kwamba tayari amesha kufa. Yani ingekuwa sawa angeandika Atieno has died. Kwa yani Atieno amefanyaje? Amekufa. But ili kuondoa ukakasi sana, wakaamua mshairi akaamua kutumia this statement, Atieno's goes to glory. So this is so called euphemism, and euphemism is a one among the figures of speech which have been used by a poet in this poem, which is a freedom song. And the next is simile. What is simile, by the way? Simile refers to the comparison of two things by using conjunctions. For example, like, kwamba ni matumizi ya viunganishi katika kuunganisha sentensi mbili ambazo zinafanyaje, au vitu viwili ambavyo vinaendana. For example, a persona use a conjunction when he says, Atieno's lay and Gila's body example to the kids since she minds them like a school girl. Tunaona hapa kuna hii conjunction like imetumika na nani? Na mshairi. Kwa hiyo as long as a poet has used this conjunction to link this statement, therefore she has used a so-called simile, have been compared the two things, or two things by using this conjunction here. So this is another figure of speech that have been used in this play by in this poem by a poet. After seeing the figures of speech that have been used in the first poem, which is a freedom song, we are now moving to see the figures of speech which have been used in another poem, which is Building the Nation by Christopher H.M. Barlow, in order to justify that poems are rich in the use of figures of speech. And the first is satire. By the way, or by meaning, satire means an act of mocking people to show how foolish they are. Satire, kwamba satire maanake ni kejeli, kwamba ni kitendo cha kumock, au unaweza kusema kumkejeli mtu ili kumuonesha namna gani yeye ni foolish, mjinga, labda hajui kitu lakini anajifanya anajua kitu. That is just an example of satire. For example, in a poem, a persona mock a permanent secretary, or PS in blanks. This is portrayed by the following lines from a poem. Today I did my share in building the nation. I drove the permanent secretary to an important urgent function, in fact to a luncheon at the Vic. Kwa tunaona kwamba hapa persona anammock nani? PS. Persona ni driver ambaye anamdrive PS who is permanent secretary, ni kiongozi. Kwa hiyo persona anasema kwamba leo nimejenga share na mimi katika kujenga nini? Kujenga taifa. Nimemtembeza au amempeleka huyu permanent secretary kwenye nini? Kikao au mkutano ambao ni wa muhimu sana, lakini kumbe in fact to a luncheon at the Vic, kwamba sio kikao, kumbe walimpeleka tu katika nini? Kwenda kupata lunch. So it seems that permanent secretaries are going somewhere so that to discuss various matters, but in fact they do not discuss various matters about their concerning to their leadership, but they still they end up taking these lunches and leave what made them to go there to discuss. So this statement, in fact to a luncheon at the Vic, is a satire, because a persona is mocking a PSC, permanent secretary, that alisema kwamba wanaenda kwenye nini? Kwenye kikao, lakini kumbe wameenda tu kupata lunch. So that is a satire, and that is the first figure of speech that have been used in this poem, Building the Nation. And the second is onomatopoeia. By meaning, onomatopoeia means imitation of sound. Unaiga sound ya kitu fulani. Kwa mfano labda mlipuko wa bomu. Unasimulia story kwamba nilivyofika pale nikasikia mlipuko wa bomu. Boom. So that is onomatopoeia. Una imitate sound of something. This is seen in a poem when a persona imitate a yowling sound of a PSC. Katika hili shairi letu tunamuona persona ambaye ni driver ana imitate sound ya nani? Ya PSC, ambapo alikuwa anafanya yowling, yani tunaita kupiga miayo. Unaona? And this is being proven through these two lines. He continued yelling again, the pains we suffer in building the nation. Kwamba tunaona sasa UPS permanent secretary akawa anajifanya kama ana njaa kwa kupiga miao, yani kumbe in reality hana njaa, na anasema kwamba anasafa anayo maumivu ya kujenga the nation, but in reality pale alipokaenda kufanya vikao na PS wengine walikuwa tu wameenda kupata lunch, and they discussed nothing about building the nation. So the act of a persona imitating this sound, yelling sound of a PSC, is so called onomatopoeia. So this is another figure of speech which have been used in our poem, and it is true that poems is rich in the use of figures of speech. And another one is iron also. This is a statement whose meaning is differently from what is meant, as we have explained in the previous poem Iron, kwamba ni statement ambayo maana yake tofauti na kitu ambacho kinafanyaje kinamaanishwa. And here, like in the previous poem, the title of the poem Building the Nation is ironic, because the guy who is PS, the guys PSs in the poem are not building the nation, instead they destroy it. Yeah, kwamba sasa tunaona title au kichwa cha shairi letu ni kwamba kulijenga taifa, lakini tunaona what is being explained within a poem is all about destroying it is not about building the nation. In fact, the PS just enjoying their life without consider the poor people. So due to that, it is true, and it is sweet to say that building the nation as a title, it is ironic title, due to the fact that what has been explained within a poem is all not about building the nation. So that is another figure of speech which have been used within this poem. And the second, the last part of our question, our discussion is conclusion. And here a student can provide any relevant conclusion. For example, a student may conclude by saying that a student may conclude by showing the importance of figures of speech in sending the intended messages to the audience. So here, a student or a candidate in answering this question, he or she may conclude whatever she wishes, but his conclusion should relate to what we have discussed in the main board. For example, a candidate or student may conclude by providing the importance or significance of these figures of speech which are being used in these poems in the sending the intended messages to the society. You can say that figures of speech attract audience's attention, so in digging or in extracting the main idea of a poem. For example, a figure of speech, which is a satire, iron, or in the poem Building the Nation as a title. This attracts a reader of a poem to dig what does it mean within the poem. So by using that iron and attracting the reader's attention is where a reader is going to get well the author's intention, or to get the message that the author intended his or her audiences to extract from his or her poem. Therefore, it is true that poems are rich in the use of figures of speech. And having said so, this marks the end of our discussion in this question. Let us meet on next session.